Omissions? Hearing none, all in. Last week?
No, I don't think you were.
No, I don't think you were either. Yeah.
You just had it. Oh, no, I wasn't there.
Right.
Sorry.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
The one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you were there. Okay, awesome. No, great. Okay, hearing nothing else, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Okay, reminded that is carried. Thank you. We have public input or question period. There's only a couple. Would you like to, anyone have any comments, questions? I can read the. There are two members in the public in the gallery. You're okay? No, good. Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to new business, introduction of our community profile and staff updates on the Housing Accelerator file and related community consultation schedule. Director Lake, are you going to lead us through that? Thank you.
Jason, can you just give me a thumbs up? You're still good? You're hearing things?
Oh, yeah, it's fine. I can hear it very well.
Okay. So first of all, I'll just say that we are recording the meeting, just so everyone's aware, and we will post this on YouTube. So we do have our friends from Turner Drake here. So we have Andrew and Jigme, and they'll do a more formal introduction of themselves, but just to acknowledge who's here with us in the audience. And I'll just do a bit of an introduction, maybe on where we've come with the Housing Accelerator Fund, and just sort of set up this piece of work that they've done for us. So we're kind of all sitting in the same place. I might just move Jason down. Is that okay? If I just minimize this? Is everyone fine with that? So I'm just going to go through a very brief timeline, kind of going back to the beginning of our Housing Accelerator Fund program. So back in 2023, which seems so long ago now, but it's really when we got into this work. And there were provincial and local housing needs assessments and efforts coming from the federal government for a lot more action at all levels on housing. There was a lot of regional, national, provincial conversations around that. And we were at one point going to apply for half. We weren't going to apply for half, and then we did apply for half, the Housing Accelerator Fund, and with an associated action plan. So that all came together in the fall of 2023. And you've seen all of this before, but just to bring us all to the same place here today, there's really three sort of pillars of the action plan. I won't go through all these. We've gone through these a number of times, but just to sort of go through a timeline. In 2024, so Council actually approved the action plan with CMHC, and it was contractual arrangement for a certain amount of funding, and that all really began in February of 2024. So we started getting into orientation with the Planning Advisory Committee with the original housing needs assessment. And so I say this because this is really an update. Some of you have met Andrew before, and also builds on that work. Other parts of the Housing Accelerator Fund that we have worked on were some initial rezonings at Highland and Gasbro Avenue that we moved through a process with council, finishing really in the summer of that year. We also hired our senior planner, Mark, who's here with us, and then we quite quickly got into an election and welcomed the new council. So from there, we kind of got back into an orientation in public education and putting some initial information out on what we were doing. Started some of the work that we figured was going to take a bit longer, like the parking study, started conversations with stakeholders, and started procuring consultants for what we knew would be a significant amount of work around the plan review. And got our non-market housing group together, started meeting with them, and started really launching this just in the fall. With PAC, we talking about the safe space and the plan review overview that we brought to this group. Moving closer to today, we've done kind of an overview on the process that we're working towards and the package that we're bringing you at our next meeting in May. So just talking about the approach around scenarios and options, bringing that forward to planning committee as more of a steering committee, and eventually to council as the decision authority on making policy change and updating our planning documents. We had done some initial homework with PAC, getting initial thoughts on things. We've done a workshop on the neighborhood zones and commercial expansion just at the staff level, and then we started bringing our consultants in for introductions and to get some initial feedback to really frame the work and make sure the first package lands well. So Tristan from Happy Cities and Hussam were here to do a downtown Main Street workshop. And we followed that up with just more of an informal meeting, which I thought was really helpful. Just, again, talking about the work and how we're going to move this stuff forward. So there's been, since then, really, we're just really focused on that package. Aligning ourselves with the meetings that were scheduled, and the dates was really helpful at the last meeting. That was the biggest and best takeaway for me last meeting, just sticking with our meeting dates. So yeah, here we are today. So I just really wanted to do kind of a reminder of that was really fast and just in a bulleted form, but there has been quite a bit of work happening behind the scenes. It's kind of just trudging along as these processes go. Some of you are involved in reviewing our planning documents in the past, and it's a significant effort. So today I'm just going to go through a few more slides on what our upcoming community engagement and that next package is going to look like, and then I'll update things. I'll introduce Turner Drake to talk about community profile, the needs assessment, and some population projections, which I think everyone's going to find really interesting. In the package is also a discussion paper, which isn't really on the agenda. It's sort of just a piece, something for folks to think about as we get further into this work over the next number of months. A few other pieces as we move forward, and I think this is a lot of kind of the questions that I've been getting, just how is this going to play out over the next few months. So just trying to lay this out to you in some logical fashion here. So those growth scenarios and options and kind of the bigger directions on how we could meet our half targets are going to be brought forward in a package in May. So that includes the downtown work, it includes the neighborhood work. And we are planning to go out and engage around that work and the scenarios and the options and the trade-offs that exist around making policy change. So from after the May Planning Committee, Council and PAC would kind of receive that work, not asking for recommendations at that time. Taking that work out to the community, and I'll go through some of the different tools that we hope to get feedback on. And then we would bring the work back in a What We Heard report for PAC to think about the work, identify issues, and work towards a recommendation to council on directions. I think within there as well, there's probably going to be another council workshop, and I'll show you some of the other consultation that will be happening. Once we have a recommendation coming out of PAC, we'd like some direction from council to kind of move forward on I'll say, sort of finishing a draft planning document. So an updated municipal planning strategy and an updated land use bylaw primarily, and really working through some of the sticky issues. So that, like, I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything here. There will be some number of more difficult issues that we'll have to work through, and then there'll be some area of work that probably most people are fine with moving forward. But it's really important, as people that have been involved in this work before, to really sit down and go through that stuff in detail, bring back additional analysis, or have more conversation around that. The other really great thing about that, and we're updating our municipal plan, is council's also planning some strategic planning. So that can also inform the update to our planning documents and some sort of bigger picture vision and direction for the town overall. So yeah, over the summer, we would be working through hopefully getting some direction. I am saying July or September. If we don't have the pieces in place to get really firm direction on, let's say, finishing a draft document, that's fine. We'll move it out to the next meeting. We typically don't do meetings in August. It will probably continue not to do that. And so we'd pick things back up in September. So that's a little bit fluid. But again, we would keep moving with our scheduled meetings. So over the summer, there's still a tremendous amount of work to do, regardless of what the more difficult issues are. There's still a lot of work just setting up these documents and bringing a draft package together. There will inevitably be additional engagement once we do have draft documents for people to consume. And there'll be a public process in front of council with another recommendation from the planning committee. And the expectation at the end of the process, whenever that is, I'm saying fall or early winter, hopefully, we'd have some decisions around a set of planning documents that we're adopting and moving on with implementing. So that's really summarizing a much bigger process, and there's a lot of detail and decisions and conversations and different things in there. But I thought there was a lot of desire to have this kind of laid out at the last meeting. There's some other related initiatives, which I'm sure people are wondering about. So there's some work going on with Acadia University. A lot of the zoning work and general kind of development rights in the neighborhoods in the downtown, they impact the university community, whether that's students, administration, faculty, all of those people that are involved in the university live in the community or commute into town or whatever their relationship is with the town. So some of that is nested in the work. And then there's a specific piece of work working with them around things like parking and some of these issues, but also looking at that Southeast campus that we've shown you before up around the tower, and working with them around a bit of a process that supports them and some of their aspirations on campus. So that will come into the process, I would say, at the earliest in the summer. I'm more anticipating that coming in the fall, just as a piece that would be looking at that area of campus. And I just say student housing is everywhere and will fall, as everyone knows. There's also a non-market housing strategy that is going to support some of the policy recommendations, and that will be very complementary. We hope to have an early draft of that in the summer when this work is being brought forward to council and can be considered as we start working towards what the final recommendations and draft documents say. So that will be another significant piece of work that needs to be considered. And then there's more technical sort of studies and other things that we'll have that some may want to get into the details of and some may not. But we are working on a parking study, which includes things like parking counts and looking at different actual metrics around how much people are using areas of the town. And then finally, I have here about placemaking. So we are, with the downtown work, a big theme there, what Tristan was talking about was around placemaking and making improvements to the downtown. And I have this induced demand idea there. And that's just making, inducing demand to be in Wolfville, making the place a little bit better. And the idea there is there's a lot of things in the downtown that can make Wolfville a little bit better, and they have a lot of ideas around that we are already doing and can be supplemented both through things the town's doing, things that we're talking with the WBDC about, and the great thing about the Housing Accelerator Fund is it can supplement some of those initiatives and contribute towards people wanting to be in town is really what the idea of induced demand is for housing. So I think this is the last slide that I'm going to talk to. So Happy Cities and Fathom Studios are, we're finalizing a schedule with them around rolling out public engagement after the May 8th Planning Advisory Committee. So we're looking at a schedule between the 12th and the 30th of May for sure, and inevitably going into June. And as I said earlier, also having other sessions through the summer for certain issues, whether it's individuals or other stakeholders, and then having another round in the fall. So this is just for the May to June. So we've been using Wolfville Blooms as an information portal. They're working on an online survey that can be shared. They'd like to get out in the community. Those are the pop-ups downtown when the weather is a little nicer and is more conducive to doing that. We were talking to them about the grocery store, but as I see the construction starting, that may not be the best location. So we'll see. And having public open houses. So if you attended events like the East End Secondary Plan, having open forums where people can come in and discuss issues, anyone from the public. They've been doing a number of interviews already. They'll continue to do those. And meet with people inevitably, and this happens in my life as well. Some people really want to talk in great detail about certain things, and we're happy to make the time. And the consultants can also make some time for individuals, groups, or circle around particular issues. So some of the other key things are here as well. The last point there is around other committees. So we have a non-market working group. So we'd like to have a session related to this May 8th work with them and looking at the options and the trade-offs with them. And then we also have an equity and anti-racism and accessibility, two separate groups. But there's a thought from Barb Shaw, who's our communications person at the town, if you don't know, to bring those two groups together for a session as well. And there could be other things, but this is significant. This is a significant scope of work for us and for them to support, and in a fairly compressed timeline. So we'd like to have at least what we get done by June and schedule our regular meeting and come back and have a discussion on what we've heard. Also, that would be a great opportunity for PAC to then have digested the work and have a good discussion. There could be opportunity there to make some or a recommendation or not. I think at a certain point, we do need direction from council at the end of the day. So things will go up from PAC to council. The real sort of final process will be through the fall. And so there'll probably be pieces of recommendations to keep the work moving from the planning committee and council, and then another round of those, as I say, in the fall to complete the work and move towards finalizing and moving on. This is I believe Tristan from Happy Cities provided us some of this just to help conceptualize it a little bit and talk about some bits of approach. So just talking about a goal on how growth can best support people's desires for their community. And I hope anyone that's talked to Tristan and our other consultants are feeling like they're really listening to what the desires of the community are, and we're really trying to make the work land in an appropriate place, given the challenges and opportunities that we're facing, and also meeting the requirements that we have in the HAF agreement. So yeah, that's really what this is about. The graphic at the bottom is from the International Association of Public Participation. They do a good job of sort of simplifying different levels of participation. And this is obviously somewhat simplified, but really from a, looking at this from staff and consultants perspective, we're really looking at the planning committee to really be collaborative with the work. Work closely together at each step of the decision. At the end of the day, I put in red here, town council is vested in making the decision. I don't think council will sort of give their decision-making authority away, and they'll consider all of these different pieces. So certain people will come into the process and just want to be informed. That will be the best way to serve those folks. Some people will really more want to be consulted and really feel and see how their input is reflected in decisions. And there's another layer of really involving folks. And that's why there was so many different avenues of consultation, because just in my experience, there isn't a one size fits all. The one public open house or something just doesn't work. We have a lot of different types of folks and different capacities, and people are coming at the issues from very different places and levels of knowledge and different passion for certain issues. So certainly trying to respect that. And I've been really happy with the feedback I've been getting from the conversations that the consultants have had. And they've really translated that, I think, really well into the work. And it's, I think, landing in a place that I think folks will be comfortable with, I hope. So yeah, I'm maybe going to stop there, and then I'm just going to give a little bit of context about how some of this work that Turner Drake's doing kind of translates into the real world, into our policy documents, and maybe how it also should inform this bigger piece of work that's moving forward.
Can we just stop for one sec? Can I just make sure everybody's good with what you've got so far?
Sure.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions or concerns about the timeline or questions? That's what I need.
Question about the timeline and the public engagement piece. Given that a lot of the public engagement is going to be taking place when students are out of town, are we doing something to ensure that the student voice is collected as part of the public engagement?
Yes, and that's part of why I think in the fall we're really going to have to do more engagement. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll do, I mean, we'll do what we can. The timing is such that we can't back the process up. So we'll engage with the students as we can. There's still students around.
Yeah, I just
and
wanted to highlight.
for sure. And thanks for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, I just wonder, how often is your non-market housing working group meeting? Have you met very often, or just haven't heard a lot from it, that's all?
Do you want to speak to this? Yeah. I can just give you this if you want.
Yeah, so they meet on an as needed basis. So we've taken a little bit of a hiatus the past few months, just as we were working on getting this bit of work ahead, this growth management package. So I have an intention of bringing them together for a workshop, as mentioned, that Devin had described a couple of slides previously. And I also have another bit of work for them to review, and they will be supporting that non-market housing strategy that will be delivering draft version this summer. So they should be picking up the pace in the coming months for sure. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. Questions or concerns about first part? Great. Thanks. Thank you for that, Devin. I don't think you are.
Batteries are dead. Yeah, the battery died. Lindsay overpowered it. I don't know if this one's working. Oh, it is working. Yay. I have Mike McLean in my mind, our former finance director, that would always have extra batteries on hand. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, so I was just going to say that those we'll provide the slides. And so if you have any questions about that timeline, once you're able to kind of go through it in more detail, just reach out to us and we can clarify things. We're going to send out a detailed schedule with dates, locations. It's not mandatory that people, I've said this before, but we would love to have everyone there. We would actually love to have people there, especially from the planning committee, actually supporting the conversations in the rooms. We're not going to force you to do that. We get paid to go to these meetings and do that work for council. So if you can make it, it's great. And we might even put a name tag on you, but you don't have to do that. So that'll be up to you and your comfort level. So I'm referring to this as a community profile because most of you are probably pretty familiar with our municipal planning strategy. It has a whole section, part 4, called community profile and housing needs. So this is really an update to inform this bigger policy document and the direction. We do have the ability to update this on a regular basis. We should be updating this on a regular basis. That doesn't always happen in every community. And it really should reflect current conditions and trends. So that's why they're here. I think this should really help on a number of fronts that we're working on in the town, including the strategic planning that council's working on. And there has been quite a bit of change and there continues to be change. So I think Andrew and Jigme will do a great job of telling you how that goes. In this one for you while you're doing that.
All right. It sounds like it's working, so that's good. Yeah, thank you everyone for having us here today. My name is Andrew Scanlon-Dickey, manager of our planning division at Turner Drake and Partners. Many familiar faces from the last time I did a presentation here. I believe that was fall 2023, talking about the provincial housing needs assessment. I'm here today with Jigme Cherab. He's our manager of our economic intelligence unit. And so both of us have been working on this project. While I'll be the main, I guess, presenter, any questions, we'll be more than happy, both of us, to answer as much as we can. If there's anything that we can answer, we'll do our best to get you answers ASAP through your staff. Yeah, so for those of you who aren't familiar with Turner Drake and Partners, and those of you online who want to know a little bit more, we are a multidisciplinary real estate consulting firm. We were established in 1976, and at present we have 28 professional staff spread across 7 divisions, 2 of which are represented today in planning and EIU. We are based in Halifax, but we do work nationally. And so we've done a broad range of work across each of our divisions, but among ours specifically, we help a lot in terms of housing, economic profiles, and as well just general community development. That's okay. So today specifically, we're here to present to you kind of interim or initial findings for the community profile work for the town of Wolfville. The presentation will be organized under 4 main headings, most of which will have several slides each. First of all, we'll go into just description of the population and demography. So we'll look at who's living in Wolfville, how that's changed and what trends are emerging, and then how that folds into what we might anticipate going on into the future. That conversation will lend very well to an introduction into why dwelling demand projections have changed since the last iteration. After that, we'll go into a very brief conversation about labor force and economic well-being, because those are also topics that lend well to that housing conversation. And then lastly, wrapping it all up with conversation about housing demand. Yeah. So to start off, just a little bit of background into Wolfville, at least in terms of the numbers. So Wolfville's estimated population in 2024 was 5,526 people. This represents an average growth of about 3.2% per year since 2016. So if you look at the chart on the right from 2016 onwards, there's fairly substantial growth that's being illustrated. Those who are familiar with the census profile from Statistics Canada for the town of Wolfville, you'll be quick to realize that the total population reported there was 5,057 in 2021. Whereas in this chart, we are reporting 5,247. The data we use for this are annual population estimates, so it is slightly different than the census profile. As a little bit of context, and I guess generally for your information, when we're talking about population estimates, what they do is after the census, in this case 2021, make adjustments such as for non-respondents. Once they have that information, they make further adjustments on an annual basis for administrative data like births, deaths, and migration rates. And that's how we get those numbers like estimates for 2024. We only have it for the total number. We don't have it broken down by age demographic. So unfortunately, we can't go into that apart from the 2021 census. But it's a good way to illustrate what the changes have been over time rather than only looking at it on a 5-year basis. That said, it's important to emphasize estimates as the numbers. They are not exact, as local administrative data is not actually readily available. So assumptions are made at a higher level or a higher geographic level. That said, while the estimates may not be exact, the trends from estimates generally range true. In this case, that means there's been considerable pace of growth for the town of Wolfville. And what's especially noteworthy is that, and as we'll see over the next few slides, is that that growth doesn't look to be temporary. Instead, it looks to have been longer term, sustained growth. Another important thing to bring up, and this is something that will come up in future slides, and I mentioned it during the previous presentation in 2023, is that 2021 was an interesting year all around. And it had a particular impact on population numbers for the town of Wolfville. At the time, pandemic, the census was collected in May 2021. Normally, a lot of students would have been home, whereas at that time, many actually continued to live in the town of Wolfville, traveling restrictions and whatnot. And so there was an overrepresentation of students at the time as part of the census. That's not to say that there was not growth. There was definitely growth in the town of Wolfville. But when you're looking at the total number, it may be a little bit smaller. The biggest indication of this, or what we look at, is if you look at the age groups or the total number of residents between 15 to 24, there was a 50% increase between 2016 and 2021, whereas from 2011 to 2016, it remained stable. So we'll keep that in mind for other topics that come up, particularly around like income and labor force metrics. So we've talked a little bit of kind of the recent trends, but if we look at the longer term, so what's happened over the last 2 decades, well, if you compare it to specific communities across Nova Scotia, as well as in New Brunswick, being Sackville, you see that Wolfville has actually shown the highest overall growth in population compared to each of these, at least the ones that we define. So you have Nova Scotia, Halifax, Amherst, Bridgewater, Kentville, Antigonish, Berwick, and Sackville, and Wolfville's well in the lead there. Even enough so that if you were to consider even the influence of the overrepresentation of students, you would probably still very well be at the top. What's just interesting though, in particular for the student population and its relationship to the total population of Wolfville, is that the share of the town's population made up of temporary residents is shrinking. And it will likely continue to shrink over the future. And this isn't surprising given the overall growth in the community. But what it does is represent a change in the relationship between the focus on student population versus permanent residents. So the town's international and out of province students share of total people in the community has been declining overall. So if you look at the chart, we see in 2004, that share of the total population represented about 76%, whereas by 2024, it was closer to 36%. Important note, international students as non-permanent residents are normally counted as part of the total population as part of a census, whereas out-of-province students are not. So these 76% and 36% are more a representation of the change that's happening. And what that change is showing is that the community is transitioning from a more transient student-centered population to one that is increasingly permanent and resident-based. So a lot of times we talk to these communities that have a heavy influence from universities, like, oh, my town doubles in size during the school year. That's becoming less and less the case for Wolfville.
Andrew, do you want to take questions as we go? Is that okay?
I'm open to be as informal as or as formal as you would like to be. So if you have a question right now, I'm happy to answer.
I think Councillor Elliott has one.
Yeah,
Our
of course.
pattern is to turn the light on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good signal.
So look for the bright light.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to ask if you're
Right. So this is not a new thing, and it's kind of the natural change that you would see with a growing community. It's kind of the convergence of you're growing organically as a community in terms of your regular like resident base. And then as an academic institution, while the student population does increase, it's not generally increasing at the same rates as the overall community would increase, right? Because you can only have a max amount of people that you can enroll. So yeah, we've been seeing this over time, and we'll go into a little bit of the impacts of the, I guess, lower immigration numbers and projections in a little bit. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Did that cover? I may look at Jigme a couple times here and there because he was the author of all this content. So if you see that I pause for a moment and look to the expert, I apologize. All right, so we've talked about students. Generally, students are, particularly if they're from international or from other countries, they're classified as non-permanent residents. But when we speak about immigrants, we see that the town of Wolfville has a higher representation of immigrants than generally across Nova Scotia. And it's actually quite in line with the HRM, where the influence of a academic institution where that comes into play is that Wolfville really, I guess, shines or has a greater representation of that non-permanent resident population. So if you see at the bottom right of the chart, in the turquoise, 8% of Wolfville's population in 2021 was a non-permanent resident. Non-permanent resident isn't only a student, it's also folks on work visas. Whereas across the province, it was about 2.3% and HRM is 4%. So it's really that influence of the student population locally. To give an idea, though, how people are moving to Wolfville. So in 2021, according to the census, there were about 1,200 people locally who had moved here from other Nova Scotia communities. This isn't moved in 2021, but had moved at one point in history to Wolfville. Of those, about 390 had moved or migrated to Wolfville in 2020 alone, or the year prior to the census. Similarly, 660 residents of the town had moved here from elsewhere in Canada. About 290 had arrived in 2020. About 475 international migrants live in Wolfville, of which 85 migrated in 2020. Important to note that from 2020, that was the point for many communities where the uptick in migration from international sources and interprovincial sources really started to be apparent. And so while we don't have the annual migration numbers for the town of Wolfville, given the increases across the province and across the region, it's very likely that there is a greater representation of folks from international sources within the town. Any questions about that? I see no lights. So that all leads us to a conversation about the future. So we've talked a little bit about now, a little bit about the past, but what do we anticipate going forward? So when it comes to population projections, we always like to put out a little bit of word of caution. Projections are in many ways an educated guess. They're a little bit of a black box where uncertainty always lingers. We have to use historical data, and the results always or more so reflect the conditions of the current political, environmental, social, and economic climate. So what's important to consider, particularly for these projections, is that they now consider or incorporate the recent federal immigration plans. So as part of the 2023 housing needs assessment in particular, and so that used 2022 numbers, we were at a period where there was particularly increases in both international and interprovincial in-migration, whereas now we're entering a period, at least according to the plan from 2025 to 2027, of anticipated reductions, at least from international sources. So what does that mean? Even if we anticipate that there's going to be, I guess, less in-migration, regardless of the scenario, whether it be the minimum, maximum, or the average, Wolfville is likely to see its population still grow. So if you're looking at the low scenario, by 2034, could reach, while this seems very precise, the projections still remain, always put caution to these numbers. The low may bring 5,853 people by 2034 as a total. And the high scenario, by 2034, Wolfville may reach 6,323 people. So to give an idea, or I guess an extreme idea as to what's really driving the future growth of the population, we look to the low growth scenario. So the chart on the right, what it represents is between 2024 and 2044, what change in the share of an age group, so what change might an age group have in its share of the total population? So by 2044, due to a 35% increase in the 65 plus age cohort, senior populations will represent 5.2 percentage points more of the share of the population. In relation to that, the share of residents at every other age group is projected to decline. And so these declines stem from, one, the influence of such high growth among the senior population, but also due to lower international and stabilizing interprovincial migration that would normally bring in those younger population groups. So I'll stop there for a brief moment before we get into the next sections. Any questions about those population projections?
In a previous slide, you spoke to how the age demographic continues to decline, meaning we're getting more and more younger demographic here. So how are you taking that trend and then kind of projecting outward that, oops, all of a sudden it's going to actually decline? Like, where does that trend flip?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that trend really does flip in relation to those immigration statistics. So when we perform the projections, I guess in simple terms, it's creating a relationship between the town of Wolfville and what's anticipated to occur at a provincial level in regards to folks coming in of different age groups and from different sources, being from international or from other provinces. And so other provinces, but mostly international sources, tend to bring the younger age cohorts. And so as that, I guess, source of population dries up, or at least becomes much more limited, then those historic trends of growth in those age cohorts kind of stall or flip towards more the organic, natural processes of what we've seen in the past of an aging population.
Sorry, just to follow up on
Yep.
that. So do you have, I think you did show though the numbers where the majority of the growth that Nova Scotia experienced, or sorry, that Wolfville has experienced, where the majority of those people were coming from, and wasn't it the majority were coming from within Nova Scotia, namely Halifax, and then the next place was Ontario and Alberta.
Yep.
So if majority of that growth isn't coming from the international, sorry, if the majority of that growth isn't coming from international sources, or maybe you have stats that indicate what % of that growth comes from international sources, because I'm just trying to correlate that to
Yeah,
the
okay,
decline.
I understand. So two important things to note. One, there's a little bit of a gap in the data from the census to now. So from the census to now, there has been a little bit more of an influence from the internet, like not from elsewhere within our province, but from other provinces and international. In addition to that, so for instance, the 1,200 people in Wolfville who had moved here from Nova Scotia communities or other Nova Scotia communities, that's not only recently, but that's like over, could be last 3 decades, 4 decades. When we look at it, it's like, yeah, 300, a big thing being 390 persons migrated in 2020 alone, but maybe 2/3, 3/4 of that number, or at least a very similar number, also came in from other sources. So if you look at the addition of residents from elsewhere in Canada plus the international, it was effectively the same amount as who came from elsewhere in Nova Scotia. So if you dry up one side of that, then you've effectively halved your growth. Does that make sense? I think.
Okay.
I feel I can continue. I feel like I lost myself on that. So
That's okay. I guess you might not have all the answers. I just think that, when we are looking at projections, it's just challenging to say where all those sources might.
Yeah. So I can
come
make
from.
that so we can dive a little deeper into that to have that conversation potentially as part of the community profile to connect that better. I recognize I don't have the numbers in front of me right now to talk
That's
to
just
specifics,
also
but
thinking, because we live in such a big farming community, and with the wineries that surround us, that also draws people here to live and work.
Mhm.
So we're not just talking about international students. That there'd be a lot of people coming here to work in those industries, and that isn't necessarily going to go away.
Nope, that's a great point.
That's it.
Yep. No, I'll keep note of that. And this is also a moment to get your impressions of these as well, right? We're at the initial phases, and so if there's any comments, we're more than happy to
My
receive them.
personal feeling is that I feel that there's a lot of demand from like younger or starting out new families that want to come here
Sure.
and move here. But it's just how I feel. I don't have stats on that.
No, is mine working? Okay. Yeah, I had a similar question, actually. Why do we think that there's more 65 plus happening now as compared to, and if it's only because of the changes in the federal government's immigration policy, okay, but I also have this, and now because this is a projection, I'm realizing I'm talking about what happened in the past. I feel like there are more younger families here now than there was when I came here 20 years ago, and certainly more than 10 years ago. I'd be interested to know if we know what the school numbers look like as well, because I think that would be indicative of some of the things that happen in our community. Yeah, I think I was surprised by that.
So I will reemphasize as well, like this is the more extreme low growth scenario, and it was meant to paint the picture of there is a higher emphasis occurring among the like senior cohorts. When you look at the higher growth scenarios, there is more stabilizing. But in either scenario, seniors tend to lead the charge, but the intensity of how much they do is different. So you wouldn't see as great numbers as for the other cohorts. I'm being poked by my colleague.
Oh, no, I also just wanted to make sure that, the point comes across that these are changes in the share and not changes in the size of the age group. So the shares declining, the negative shares doesn't necessarily mean that the number of people has decreased. It means that the makeup of the age group has declined, and that could be because the population has grown much more.
It's a proportionate change, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
My apologies for not making that clear. Thank you,
That's
Jamie.
Okay.
Okay.
What else? Okay. Carry on.
All right. So I'll go very briefly over some labor force numbers, and then we'll talk a little bit about economic well-being, and then go into the housing demand conversation. So for the labor force, very quickly, generally speaking, for Wolfville, for all of the labor metrics, they are below what you would see at the province, or I guess, quote unquote, worse than you would see overall across the province. So participation rates are lower out in Wolfville, unemployment rates are higher, and employment rates are lower. Generally, this is an impact of the overrepresentation of students. The census, again, was taken in May 2021. And so at that time as well, students may not be employed as actively in May 2021 as well. That is finishing a semester. They may be starting to work in June because they ask for have you worked in the week prior to the census effectively. So there's impacts from just the overrepresentation of students, but not only that, if we consider just the continued effect of student age populations plus the growing seniors, it may be that the labor metrics remain low relative to the province overall over time. So a big thing, at least takeaway that we had was Wolfville's labor market not necessarily needs to improve, but the ability to attract young professionals, particularly those who have gone to school here and want to remain here, for the labor force, that seems to be a pretty important kind of consideration. And that may be through a couple of things, and this isn't necessarily something that can be done through the PAC, but looking at finding more longer term employment, supporting entrepreneurship, or even finding ways to support remote work options, sort of thing. when we talk about economic well-being relatedly, so with employment comes income, yeah, of course.
When I was looking at, I guess I have a question just about the definition of young professional. So, because in my mind, I'm thinking we don't need just we need younger workers, right? So, in my mind, professional means a post high school, some sort of degree or certificate.
Yep.
But we certainly need carpenters, and we need all kinds of people, right? Not just professionals. So maybe I'm being too.
No, that's a great point. I think that was just a misuse of the word by me. I think young workers was generally the idea that we were trying to convey. Obviously, you would like to have a broad range of employment opportunities and not focus only on one. But yeah, so it's just generally that young demographic to be able to potentially go to school here, remain here for work, or maybe move here at a younger age, work here, or work close by and remain within the community and like grow a family in the community, age in the community sort of thing.
So this always sounds better in my head than it does when it comes out of my mouth. So I'm just curious whether, so we're looking at higher rates of unemployment, and that's capturing students primarily because they're studies or they're working part-time, that sort of thing. But there's also stay-at-home parents, people who are under 15 can't legally work, people who are disabled, etc. If we're looking to grow the labor market, is this something that should be a WOLFA issue, or is this a regional issue, or?
That's a good question, and I'd say it's a both issue. We actually do have numbers, estimates on the number of people who do not participate in the labor force, which has grown. But the goal ultimately should be to lower that share to maximize participation in the labor force, so that, you know, as long as the participation rate is high, then the employment rate will reflect more accurately. Unemployment rate is always a dubious number in my opinion. But yeah, in short, it should be an issue that should be on the minds of everyone.
Alan sort of mentioned it at the end, but the question about unemployment, if we're talking Wolfville, but I'd be interested in, you know, compared to say Nova Scotia, what about Kentville, New Minas, Kings County, like where their unemployment level would be?
Unemployment rate was higher than ever all across the country. But it is particularly high in Wolfville, and that is because of the presence of Acadia University. A larger proportion of your population and thereby your labor force is made up of students. Students don't work full time. Most of them don't work at all.
Awesome. Okay. So naturally.
Sorry, I have a question.
Oh.
So you're counting students as unemployed. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Because they are, I mean, they're occupied, they're not strictly speaking employed, but they're students. So maybe that's skewing the numbers a bit to do that.
They definitely do. That's why I feel it's more important to look at the numbers, the employment numbers, rather than the unemployment numbers. As because even the way that the two numbers are calculated, unemployment rate takes the share of the people who are not employed but are looking for a job as a proportion of the people who are in the labor force, whereas the employment rate considers the entire population of a region that is above the age of 15. So it's better if we, for a community to focus on improving the employment rate than focusing on the unemployment rate.
Okay, so disregard the unemployment statistic.
No, that's definitely not what I'm saying, but it's more precedence should be given, importance should be, I think, the aim of a community should be to improve employment metrics. Yeah.
Okay.
So are we saying then it's really hard to compare Wolfville with Kentville or the rest of the province? Because if we have a population of 5,500 people, 2,000 of them are Arcadia students, you know, or whatever. So let's say we have 7,000, 2,000 are Arcadia students. There's 500 or 600 underneath the age of 15. The numbers are going to be drastically different than the measurement in comparison to somewhere else. So, okay.
Particularly the case if you look at unemployment, because it'll be even
Skewed.
more skewed. Yeah. So when we talk about the labor force, talking about labor, talking about income, and how that translates generally to economic well-being. Biggest item that we speak to when we talk about economic well-being is poverty rates. Wolfville's overall poverty rate was 18.7% in 2021, which was notably higher than the province overall and the HRM. The rate was quite a considerable 50% for the 18 to 24 age group. Again, higher than HRM in Nova Scotia. This is considering the conversation we've just had over the last few minutes, not surprising. But what's interesting to look at for Wolfville is that if you ignore the 18 to 24 age group and look to the others, so 25 to 54, 55 to 64, and 65 plus, Wolfville is higher than the overall of Nova Scotia in each of those categories. So what it's showing is it's not only a student affordability issue, but it's also a Wolfville-wide affordability issue going on, not only in regards to housing, which we're talking about more so today, or at least in a few slides, but any sort of necessary goods or expenses. Any questions about this slide? There we go.
Oh, no, I have to keep it on. Sorry. Yeah, so I think to your point, it's really remarkable at that gap, 25 to 65 and over, and how considerable that is. So I was wondering if I could ask two questions. One is, could you just talk a little bit about the measure itself, the market basket measure, and what that entails? And then the other question is, so when I, many moons ago, sort of looked at concentrations of income, what I think I remember, but I'm getting older now, is that Wolfville also has sort of the highest concentration of people in the top income threshold as well too. And so I'm wondering if this change in 25 to 65 is that the gap is actually becoming larger between the top end and the lower, or if this is actually just a general across the board decline in income.
So the market basket measure is our country's official poverty measurement, the way we measure poverty. It was started in 2018, I believe, implemented. Before that, we used the low income cutoffs, which tended to skew the number higher. How the market basket measure measures poverty rate is it sets a threshold based on various components like price. They basket various goods and services into 5 components: clothing, shelter, transportation, and others like that. And then they calculate a threshold for each community across the country, saying, and that threshold is supposed to represent the income that average household of 2 parents and 2 children must be making to be able to have a modest and comfortable living. That's the definition. And the thresholds change across like regions. Now, your question about the wealth gap. Unfortunately, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I did look at that, but what I do remember is that average income is lower in Woodville when compared to Nova Scotia and other areas.
Just very quickly to jump in on that last question as well, with other communities that we've been working with, there does seem to be this kind of like widening gap. It's a little bit distorted, unfortunately, by the 2021 census because of CERB payments. All those folks who would have normally, and it's great that they receive that income, but who would have normally been at the much lower income brackets are reported as being higher. So it's a little distorted, but when you start to dig deep behind it and kind of adjust your thinking as to what's like the low income and whatnot, that gap has widened. And it's not only a Wolfville thing. I mean, I don't have the numbers right on me, so I can't confirm exactly, but I would be pretty sure to say that it's probably a Wolfville thing. I definitely know it's a across Nova Scotia thing. I know it's across BC thing. It's generally a Canadian thing, unfortunately. And oftentimes it is tied to this, like a lot of those folks who are earning the greater incomes, they've been in longest established careers, they're building equity in homes that they purchased quite some time ago. And then those lower income groups who haven't been able to climb out of financial vulnerability while they had some support in 2021 and a couple of years around then remain kind of stuck. We can look at the specific numbers though and provide that as part of the community profile.
Did you say that our average income is lower than other places as well?
So great segue to the next slide.
That's what I'm here for.
There we go. So yes, median income in Wolfville is lower for both individuals and for households compared to the Nova Scotia overall. Again, this is likely influenced by the overrepresentation of students. So what's easy to, I guess, conclude when we talk about, oh, this is probably because of students. And so the trends are probably like better. But what we need to remember is that slide before. So like this isn't only a student issue or affordability issue. We're seeing that there's high rates of poverty or high percentage of households and individuals in poverty, not only from 18 to 24, but those above. And so I guess to even continue on with our conversation that we have, there's still very much a segment of the population within Wolfville who still struggle financially to pay for housing, to pay for regular day-to-day expenses. Unfortunately, the exact number, if we were to exclude students, we can't get that. But you would probably see it either near or just above the rate of the province. But yeah, that's only really just an educated guess, unfortunately. I see a light, yes.
You did speak to it a little bit there at the end, but is it not possible to entirely take out the students from any of this data? Because as you say, it's skewing everything, so we don't really know.
Unfortunately not. There is some possibility to look into it at a provincial level or even federal or national level, but there's no data at the local level, regional level, county level that would be usable to come to any conclusion like that. Really, the best basis we have is look at 2016, which is so far ago, but off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what that relationship was in 2016, but that would be the better kind of, at least ratio of Wolfville to Nova Scotia, at least relative to 2021. 2021 is a little bit of a income, yes. Income's actually, I don't think that one is available. For Wolfville? I think that's a public data.
Awesome. Jen?
Thanks. It's more of a comment, I guess, just heading back to the last slide and looking at the poverty level. I'm like really surprised about the 55 to 64-year-olds in here. And I'm wondering, like, I know that we alluded to COVID and students are skewing everything. This isn't like in the category of students. It's a category that I'm in, and it just seems rather high. I'm wondering, it has something to do with maybe some people like retired early from COVID. And I'm just wondering where it is, because as I sit here around council and I'm wondering, as people are getting older and ready to retire, 64 isn't really retirement age anymore. So I'm wondering if you can just expand on that just a little bit for my brain to sort of comprehend why is that so much higher.
It was unexpectedly higher in 2021 because of COVID-19. A lot of income streams that most people in that age group had were stopped when data for this particular census was collected. Other than that, that year is also when the housing crisis started. That might also have played into it. That is also when that's also when we saw an influx of immigrants coming into the region. That might have played into it as well. But yeah, those are some of the things I can tell you off the top of my head.
Yeah, I guess that just really stood out to me. I mean, when I look at 65, we all think 65 retirement age, but I mean, obviously people are working well beyond that. And it is more in a line. I mean, we're still higher, but it's still more in a line with the province and HRM. But that one is, it's just information that's good to know.
We can expand on that in our community.
Wendy?
I'm just remembering, well, 20 years ago when the late Dick Groot had a lands on poverty, 25% was the children's poverty rate in Wolfville. And the Nova Scotia poverty rate, as indicated by last year's family and child poverty, was 23.8%. The numbers that they could come up with. I just think we're not aware of it enough. The numbers have been there consistently for some years. Those for that age group anyway.
I wonder too, because I these do strike you as a little higher. Well, they are higher than other places or the rest of the province. So I mean, 18 to 24, I think makes sense because of Acadia, which skews the numbers. I think there are a good number of people from that 55 to 65 plus and older who are retired in this community and may be drawing on their retirement funds. However, have probably, if I think of some people, have already saved and have, paid off their homes and all those other things. So I don't think poverty would be how I would describe them, maybe based on the income they're making. It might put them in a lower tax bracket, but I don't see them as poverty stricken. So I wondered if that was it. And I think we're also an inclusive community. So I think that we do attract a lot of immigrants here, which would skew it again. And I wonder, is there any correlation between a community that does have, a fairly well-to-do population and then attracting others who may not be as wealthy, because there is, I think, a good number of us, contribute to the charities and things in your communities. Is there a correlation between those two things? Maybe that's a socioeconomic thing as opposed to a demographic thing. Yeah. Just curious. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now to the last few slides of the presentation, speaking about housing demand. And so this is going to be a little bit more in line with the presentation that you would have had in 2023. Some similar charts and similar stats thrown your way with a couple additional. So a little bit of a primer or just a reminder. So the 2023 Housing Needs Assessment reported a need to build about 1,455 new dwellings by 2032. This included shortages. So based off of the new projections, they suggest anywhere from 780 to 1,100 by 2034. So if you look at the chart, what you'll see is that the in the red line, that's what it was initially based off the previous work. And then the new projections are shown by the range in gray, bordered by the dotted line. And so for this, the shift is in many ways due to the changes in immigration targets, but it's also due to, at least in the data that we used to produce the projections, a softening of interprovincial migration as well. And so overall, what that means is that regardless of the scenario, it would appear that over the next decade, or at least 2 decades, the anticipation or the needed demand is less than what we had originally reported in 2023. So before I get to the next slide, I just want to open the floor for questions and hear folks' impressions on that, if any. I can go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. Okay.
Questions? I gotta check in on Jason. Jason, are you okay up there? I can't see you, but
Yeah, I'm fine.
hey, great.
Okay. So folks may be familiar with this chart from the previous work. So this one, it lends from the 2023 work, but it showcases the same data. But again, this is from the perspective of the low growth scenario, just as an example. And so it compares the anticipated demand to the anticipated construction trends based off of historical data and estimates the unit gap that we might see over time. So even under the low growth scenario, if we do use that historical data, there is an anticipation that there would be a unit gap from now until 2034, and this includes current shortages. I will note that there have been some conversations with planning staff that have indicated that in the pipeline, or at least planned developments, there may be a significantly higher number, or I won't put any number in their mouths, but a high enough number that it seems as if might be more on target for meeting the low growth requirements over the next 2 decades, which is phenomenal in my mind. But I think there's a couple key points to consider in relation to that. So for one, I put up the low growth for a reason. The low growth represents really the minimum that the community should build over the next 2 decades, at least based off the projections. And so important to note that these are based off of policies that are most recent. This is from 2025 to 2027, the immigration plan. Things may change. And so it very well might be that the taps start running much more freely again, and the demand for housing increases yet again. So consider this like the lowest minimum that you should be looking at. Furthermore, number 2, while planned units are ideally all built, plan does not necessarily mean they are constructed. So it's always great to be ready to plan for more across the municipality. What's important to note too is that, so number 3, if this scenario were to actually be like the factual scenario, this is exactly how it plays out. Building any units above this would actually have an even greater impact on affordability, on like making it more affordable. So re-stabilizing that relationship between demand and supply. And then lastly, while we like to think we have a crystal ball, and I've already alluded that we don't in this conversation, The best indicator many times for sustained demand is market activity. So if units are being built and they're being absorbed quickly, even if the number of units built exceed our projections, generally what that is indicating is that there's unsatiated demand within the community. And so allowing for flexibility to build housing, even if it means above these projections, does mean that the market can more nimbly react. So it's just a better way to be prepared. So once again, low growth scenario, projections are a fickle beast. So better to be better prepared than not. That said, though, a takeaway from this and conversations that we've had is if this were to be the case, what it does do, at least for the next few years, before any policies change again, and who knows when they might change, it may provide a little bit of breathing room for the market to catch up. It may also mean that there's a little bit more time or easier to address infrastructure needs. So generally, it might have that breathing room. It might be giving an idea of, okay, we're not in as dire a situation as we were in 2023. All that said, though, I would obviously give caution. See, I guess, the positive in that, but also be prepared for any changes. And so when we do this work, a big thing that we always say is probably best to constantly update population projections, even on an annual, every 2 years sort of thing, because things change quite rapidly. And it's always best to be able to course correct when you can. And so with that, yeah, I was just about to open up the floor.
Yeah. So based on the information you've collected and your experience, based on these projections, are you able to actually project out the percentage of non-market housing that would be appropriate? There you go.
So,
and so the other question to that was, can you also do it by sort of typology or price point?
So I guess before I get into that, are there any questions about this slide or the slide prior to it? Okay. All right. No, that was a great segue. So as I was about to open the floor, I realized I also had this slide to speak to as well. And it speaks to a couple of those elements that you were bringing up. So using some more recent kind of provincial trends data, we can incorporate that at the local level. And without going too deep into the weeds, at a high level, so on the right-hand side, what we show is what the new demand over the next decade might look like based off of the price model of development. So whether it's market housing or a form of affordable housing. So what we see is that it appears or looks like about 52% of the new demand could be met by market rate housing, whereas about 48% ideally would be met by some form of affordable housing, whether it's just below market or deeply affordable. I recognize that this ratio or these proportions are relatively unrealistic given our province's history, not province, but nation's history, at least in the last few decades, in investment in affordable housing. So more so, it identifies that there is a need. So related to that on the left, and now that I talked to them, I should have flipped them. On the left, you see the new demand by unit size, which is quite heavily influenced by affordability. So over the next 2 decades, there is a greater or potentially a greater need for those smaller units, 0 to 1 bedrooms. This is related to affordability, decreasing household sizes, increasing senior age cohorts, stuff like that. A continued need for 2 bedrooms and still a need for 3+ bedrooms, but less so than we've seen kind of historically distributed across all communities of Canada. And in addition to this, I've only shown these 2, but we do have additional conversations about how it distributes across income categories. So how might projections be represented by different income categories, by household family types, so lone parents, couples with children, couples without children, as well as dwelling typology. Usually the most useful to represent is dwelling size versus dwelling typology, because there's many forms of dwelling types that could satisfy a certain unit size. And really when it comes to like space requirements, like the amount of bedrooms is the most important thing. So I didn't put that one on here because I didn't want to kind of push the conversation too much in that direction without too much context. But yeah, so there's a little bit of information. In the community profile, there will be even more. If there's anything of interest, I could try to look into it as well, but how far I can go is a little bit limited, unfortunately.
Thanks. Could you define market housing versus below market versus deeply affordable? Deeply affordable, that's the first time I've seen that term.
Yeah, so market housing would be like you have a new build going in. It's based off of just like current market prices. When you look at below market housing and deeply affordable housing, the definitions of those they're a little fluid, but generally below market, you're looking at housing that follows more CMHC programs. So if it's like 80% of median rent within a neighborhood, you might be looking at something like a community land trust or co-ops, alternative forms of housing that are generally more affordable. Deeply affordable housing, I guess in below market housing could also be kind of rent geared to income situations. Deeply affordable may also be rent geared to income, so that's where that fluidity occurs. But generally, it's can't remember the exact term, but it'd be like the like yeah. But there's another term for it that's escaping me. Not necessarily social housing, but like housing that meets the price levels of basic income, like allowances and stuff like. My apologies, it escapes me at the moment, but yeah.
It's the first time I've seen deeply affordable. We've had a lot of different definitions around the table over the last 2 years.
It's in recognition that and also of like emergency housing as well, because those income categories that are the most vulnerable are also not only most vulnerable of being in dire financial circumstances, but also most vulnerable of falling into kind of like homelessness and unhoused situations. So it could be traditional housing, emergency housing, anything up to looking at like rent geared to income. So it is a fluid thing. Well, yeah.
And both of those categories, below market and deeply affordable, are, almost 50% for us. So I guess it's something for our committee to look at, because there is fluidity in those discussion, in those definitions. It's, to grapple with exactly what does that mean and who are we addressing is a challenge.
I will note two things. I hadn't known about the non-market strategy, so I think that's a great opportunity to solidify like how we define this. And two, I would also like to just make sure I point out that this isn't only Wolfville. While this looks frankly quite terrifying in many ways, and you feel for those who require this form of housing, particularly deeply affordable, Wolfville is not alone in this. It is a Canadian concern.
So I was just going to ask you to clarify that. Is this for looking at Canada, or are these numbers for Wolfville?
So this is specifically for Wolfville.
Do you have similar pie charts that would capture the current demand for Wolfville?
Not on me, but I have the data to create those pie charts if you would like me to put that.
Sure. And where did you gather that demand data from?
So it's a combination of things. So we borrowed a little bit from the process that's used in British Columbia, and they use a combination of sources being homelessness data, extreme core housing need data, estimates about rental vacancies, estimates about suppressed households, so how many households did not form over the last few years based off of unhealthy market conditions. And then you apply income categories to each of those. And so,
So where would you capture, like, if there's people moving here? Where would you capture that?
so that's more difficult to capture in the now.
Yeah.
That's something that would be captured more in the projections going forward, because that's where we, analyze like the movement of people as part of the projections. Right now, it's more of like the current state, not necessarily who's moved here or when they moved here. It's like based off of now and the numbers that we know of the present, what might there be in like a shortage, and how might those have been created through like homelessness? How might they have been created through folks living in dire need already in the community?
I guess I'm just trying to understand how you would capture numbers reflecting family that's moving from Ontario and wanting a 4-bed apartment.
Yeah, so we can't go extremely sophisticated into the projections. I will say as part of it, we make several connections based off of the household's maintainer age. So the age of the person who's primarily responsible for the expenses or maintaining the home. And so as part of that relationship, so it'd be related either to income, to the different price model, it could be related to unit size. There's a lot of assumptions baked into that. It's like if you are of a certain age group, you'd have particular tendencies or distributions of how you might form in terms of a family. So if you're of a 35 to 44 year age, generally you distribute more towards having or being family age or leading a family. Whereas if you're 65 plus, the distributions tend to be more leaning towards like 2-person to single-person households. So those are all, without going, and I guess going too deep into it, there's a lot of like assumptions baked into the numbers that we use and how to make the relationships. And as part of the community profile, I believe there's a methodology that's with it. And so it would go more detail about how those are all related and used.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
Any other questions? Is that the last slide on there? Or do you-
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You want another question now?
I have so many questions. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be taking up too much time. Again, I have 2 questions because I think too much. So those targets for distribution of different housing affordability thresholds, I suppose, is that a useful target for the town to use going forward? 1. 2, if it was a target that was used, are there tools available, or does it make sense for them to try to target them?
So to tackle the first one, that's a great and difficult question. I think you do the best you can. I think it is an unrealistic number because that doesn't follow the last 2 decades of affordable housing construction at all. If anything, it's been 99% market, 1% affordable, if that. So to jump from that to nearly 50% for a municipality, unrealistic. That said, I big believer in dreaming big. But I also don't want to put any words in staff's mouth. So I'll let Devin.
No, I wasn't going to interject on that. I was just
Okay.
going to say that I think what you're saying is great.
Okay.
That's part of the non-market housing strategy is setting those types of targets informed by this. I was going to ask something else if that's okay.
I think
I think because I've been working around these numbers a lot and have gone through this over a number of years as I've seen these different changes. And like, I really appreciate all of the insight from the group because there's quite a bit there that I'm hearing around. I'm hearing that a lot of people want to move here, of young families or other types of people. And I think these numbers, to me, like point to some of the aspirational things that we might want to try to develop strategies around, whether that's supporting the school. Like that's always been something that we've talked about. Having a healthy school population is maybe the most healthy metric that we have as a town. But just sort of three numbers that are in separate places in here that I think we will put together for you is that population line that you see, which is maybe not as high as some people thought. There's numbers being thrown around, doubling the population of Nova Scotia, doubling the population of the town. You didn't see that today. And so showing that against the housing needs. And so what is the need or that demand, those demand sets of slides. So that's on the low end, the 780 number by 2034. And so that's pretty soon in my world. And so when we're 9 years away and you think of the cycles to build larger amounts of units that you've seen historically in the town, if you've been involved in any type of development, and I just wrote down ones that I'm very sure that probably will be built in, let's say, a 5-year horizon, it doesn't come close to 780. And some of those are sizable projects. And then some of them are, 1 or 2 units or 4 units. And so I think those three things need to be shown together in this shorter time scale to help everyone communicate with people, because I'm getting a lot of different impressions of these bigger gaps. But I also think, we went through a climate planning exercise that showed these really big gaps as well. And a lot of that pointed towards policy aspirations and things that the town wanted to work towards, not necessarily hard solutions or like regulatory tools. In some cases they do, but in most cases it's more pointing us in directions and like helping. I hope a lot of it will help council with strategic planning more in the bigger picture of where the town wants to go. So yeah, I just wanted to bring some of those together because I'm having a lot of conversations about people's confusion around not seeing 10,000 in the population.
Thank you. Is any other questions around the table?
Well, I would just thank Devin for that interjection, because having sat here with this committee over the years that we were working on the comprehensive development district, we were talking about, okay, that's going to be like another 4,000 people in town. So yeah, it's confusing.
I think what I wrote down is, plan potential, and Andrew wrote this as well. Zoning, the difficulty with doing a zoning exercise in the entire town when you're showing every single lot potentially changing. If you're changing the zoning of it, it doesn't mean that any change will come on any particular parcel, including when we do more detailed exercises like secondary planning. We're just establishing development rights from some number to some other number. How that plays out over time. I think that's why the historic numbers are really important, because they speak more to the absorption rates market. There is a lot of induced demand for places like Wolfville, and I can tell you that my job has changed a lot in the last number of years with people being very interested in coming here. But whether that translates to projects, particularly what's happening right now in, bigger macro sense of things, and talk of recessions and different things. So it's hard to say how that will play. And that's, we had discussions about showing ranges versus showing more really specific targets, because it's just a really difficult exercise.
Yeah, thank you. Jason, did you have any questions before we wrap up?
No, I don't. But thanks very much for the presentation. That was very helpful.
Thanks, Jason. Great. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for listening to us.
Wonderful. Director Lake, do you have anything after? Gotta get back to the beginning of my agenda again. Sorry. So we've got on there a round table. Did you have anything else, Devin, to add?
We just wanted to keep the roundtable on there. There was a lot of desire for people just
Sure.
if they want to ask general questions or ask about other
Yeah,
things.
no, wonderful. I can go around the table. Michael, do you want to start? Do you have anything you want to bring up, add, just chat?
I guess the only thing would be, I'm just looking forward to maybe a schedule for May and June and public meetings and kind of things. I think when we did that a couple of years ago, it was really important as community members to be a part of those as well. I think that helped when we were collecting data.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Kelly?
I can't make the May 8th meeting, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm away,
You're away.
traveling that
Okay.
day.
you are as well. Okay. I also am away that week. So
What?
I am away as well. So maybe we'll take a look at that because I'm not here either. Well, I'll talk with Devin after. Go ahead. You want to talk?
Is this still on? I was just going to say that I think the purpose of the meeting is just to receive the work as well. So I think we can still sort of put the package out publicly and hopefully have enough to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Go ahead, Al.
I also won't be there. So, I'm getting a brand new hip, so
Oh, congratulations.
I'm very excited. But not excited enough to be here. One of the things that I wanted to try to ask a question about, but I didn't really get to, was this idea. So we have that package of the population in the 25 to 65 plus that are in sort of poor income situation, for lack of a better way of putting it. I'd be interested if there's a way to understand what component of that is actually their housing situation, what component of that is maybe their energy cost situation. If that's able to be pulled out, I know that's pretty granular, unfortunately. But I think that would be interesting because those are sort of two areas that the municipality actually can do some work. Food, we don't really have a lot of control over necessarily, but housing policy, energy policy, PACE program, those sorts of things are things that you can touch on. So I'd be interested to see where can the municipality actually address some of those gaps.
Thank you for that. Jen?
This is going to be like a really broad question, but since I've been on council, we have like approved the Gasborough Highland 292 is coming to place. We have Maple Avenue. It seems like we have done a lot of this, but so that if you add up all those developments that we've approved lately, how many housing are we going to have? And then we have Woodman's Grove, where Peter Polly has not finished that 5th building yet, which is what?
Fall, apparently.
Yeah. So there's all these things that are in the pipes. And then and then we're talking about the non-market housing. We're talking about all this. How does that come together? Like, I feel like we have done a lot as council. And so where are all those housing coming into play?
It's all part of the equation. We've been talking about this where we've done so much planning that this plan review doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. And I've been talking to other people about this. We have a lot of plan potential, call it. I wrote down about 350 units that I think are pretty realistic in, let's say, 9 years. There's probably more than that. I'm being somewhat conservative, but I also know that the next few years might not be a great environment for building. It may also be, it's hard to say. But we're going to bring that to you. So there is a really good sense of like overall potential. But when you get down and you want to get really granular on within a zoning profile of each lot, you could do a highest and best use based on the zoning of every single lot in town. So if everyone came into the town and wanted to max out what they could do on their property, that's also a number that often comes out in these. Yeah.
No, I see that. I guess sitting from my point of view, there's a lot of stuff we have done, like, that we have done.
Definitely.
And so I understand how we're going to be looking at all the zoning. Like, I totally understand that. But I feel like we need to take that into consideration to for the housing
100%.
numbers, like.
Oh, 100%.
And I don't feel like we were talking about that specifically of all the developments that we've approved or changed the zoning on.
I think a big part of this is taking a breath and taking stock of what we've done, because we have done a significant amount of planning in the last, I don't know, 10 years-ish. West End and East End alone is a significant amount of units. There's not a whole lot else other than built, like, there are some potential bigger buildings or smaller developments that do count for quite a few units, but we'll bring that to you. I think you need to see those right beside each other. And I think that's part of the gap. It's just, when you see such a low population projection from these numbers, it doesn't necessarily correlate. Even with Peter's 74 unit building, 292 Main Street, and the building in the East End, that's quite a few units just with those 3 projects alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll bring that to you.
Yeah.
The numbers we need to.
So
I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, to that point, I think when you were talking about this concept of induced demand, you know, when we look at the potential of the comprehensive development district and those places coming online, like that is going to induce more people to come here. The demographics that we heard about is just if it's kind of Wolfville in its current situation, if we do historically, if we just go on the pace that we're going on, we know our population is going to go up to between 500 people and 1,000 people. It's not that many people, you know, that's why it is kind of striking. So yeah, some key messages around those things, particularly as we get to public engagement, I think will be helpful for us to kind of have that in our heads if we're in discussion. I just wanted to comment, thank you very much for the discussion paper. I believe Lindsay was the author on that, or certainly Devin. That was a really interesting think piece, bringing together things for us. So I just wanted to thank the team for providing that in our package.
Thank you. Wendy? So many things whirling around.
I keep thinking about 30 years of almost no affordable housing construction, and the capitalist system and what's going to happen with an election at the end of the month. Maybe things will improve. I don't know. Hope so. I don't have any answers, but there's big desires out there for affordability.
Caroline?
I think I have some questions and comments. One, next census is 2026, correct? Yeah, okay, thank you. And in relation to Devon, do you have actual numbers that were completed in 2024?
Number of dwelling units?
Yes.
We should, yeah. I don't have
Oh,
them with me, but
All right,
yeah.
good, yeah. And then a comment in relation to, there was some talk earlier about the older demographic around poverty. And one thing that strikes me, particularly if we're talking about 2021, for many people, once they retire, their income becomes fixed. And so therefore with inflation, you know, that they may be going to struggle more than they would have done before they were retired, perhaps. And the other thing that I wrote down in relation to looking around poverty is, I know the town provide a low income tax exemption, and maybe over time, like in the last so many years since 2021 or whenever, has that been going up? The number who've been receiving it, is that going up or down? So that would be very local data, and it may, you know, I know that we don't know exactly who's paying it, but certainly if older residents are living in a larger home, maybe there's something in that number, and but just some thoughts.
If we do have that data, and there has been an increase in the uptake for sure. I forget exactly what it is, and Glenn might be able to tell me, but that could be because more people are using it because of the poverty line. It also could be because we keep increasing the amount every year. I think ours is quite generous in relation to other municipalities. $46,000 or yeah. I think the only thing I would like to say is that I think that I said this to them earlier, I would like to see all of the things we have put online when we think those would come online, what that, what the potential full build out is, what is the normal attrition rate that doesn't get built? And then perhaps we can take whatever that percentage is and actually put a percent to affordable so that we can actually hit some meaningful, measurable targets instead of just saying 55%, which is maybe a bit of a pie in the sky, but maybe we can make something a little more reasonable or something that we can attain and set some targets on. And I think those things then also help us build out the things we need in infrastructure and where we would focus those on and in what spaces that would help us make decisions on that as well. So I think it's a big project to do all that, but I think it's meaningful information as we move it forward and helpful when we go out to engagement.
Yeah, I hope some of this data that we're bringing kind of lowers the temperature, certainly from the people that are calling my office, because there isn't a world where I think there's the doubling of the population. I know that's kind of out there. Just there's other factors in the construction economy and financing and different things that are probably not allowing that to happen. So the planned potential, as we'll call it, is largely planned. I don't think we're not going to be bringing in like really whole scale changes. I don't think we're going to shock you with the changes that we're showing in the zoning. From my seat, and this is a little more maybe technical on the planning side and more the administrative side from our own capacity and time we have, the biggest change we can make from my perspective is some of the process changes. And so how are we actually enabling a process to move forward, particularly after it's already been planned, as we've just been talking about, significantly? So once someone is ready to move forward, what are those steps that they're taking? And so that's going to be a big focus for me, is around process. It's not necessarily going to be doing 20-story buildings and all these new things that no one's ever heard of. Everything we're bringing forward is very much been talked about. There's not a ton of new ideas, I don't think, coming forward. So just keep that in mind, because I know people it's a hard time to think about change. There's a lot of stuff going on, and we're trying to land this well and in a place that is comfortable with the community and where we're at right now.
Great. Thank you. Jason, did you have anything you wanted to add to the round table?
No, I think I'm fine.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Hearing nothing else, I think we have a second. Do I have a second? Okay. The next meeting is May the 8th, unless, so 3 of us are not here. Do we still have quorum? You're not here either? Go ahead.
Just an idea. Perhaps we could still have a meeting, do a presentation, and actually have that so its ability to put it on YouTube. We're not asking for a motion or anything, so it would still be something that the consultants could come in and explain the work in a more condensed fashion. I think everyone would benefit from that. And then the people that aren't here could watch that. We can still do some consultation, and then we can come back and really have a fulsome discussion if that makes sense. And I'm just trying to get the work done under certain time frames, I guess, is my main concern, and bring forward some milestones and completed work.
Let's leave it for now then, and we'll see what happens. Okay, we'll let you know if it changes. Okay, motion to adjourn. Thank you. Seconded? Wendy, thank you. We are adjourned.